Hello, welcome in. Eddie Radosevich, Josh McQuestion, back down in the Soonerscoop.com HQ, Houston, if you will. George Stoya just to my left here, to your right on the television screen. Welcome into a Thursday night. I think it's just kind of an open forum. We wanted to start doing a little bit more of these live chats and kind of get a little bit more connected with the YouTube viewer out there. So welcome into the Soonerscoop.com YouTube live show on Thursday, gentlemen. Josh, are you guys packed up, ready to roll?
I I am sitting in my office and I can see luggage all over my living room right now. We leave for for Orlando tomorrow morning. I am going to Disney World again. So that is
How many times is this for you?
This is three. This is
God.
three.
That's three more than
I
me.
don't know if I have another one in me. Yeah, this is kind of Lainey's last one where she's really going to be into it, be the princesses and do all that stuff. And
gosh.
Layla, it's her first time. She's really old enough to get it all, like just to fully, to ride all the rides, do all the stuff. So I don't know. We'll see if I can muster another one. But I'm excited because you guys someday we'll get it. It's fun to watch them be excited. So I'm
Sure.
gonna dad out for a little bit. But other than that's all I have to say. Other than I hate Orlando and I'm not looking forward to the trip at all.
You say that one day we'll experience this. I don't know if I want to be a dad, Josh. I don't know.
George, I was the other way. It was the husband thing I was far less convinced about.
That too.
The dad thing I thought I was game for. The husband I was like I don't know if that's me at all. So yeah.
Are you a
So
roller
there's a
coaster
look
guy?
inside my soul. Love them. Huge roller coaster guy.
Okay,
yeah.
me too.
I will say I can really only do like the metal track now. Anything wooden, I'm too old, man. It beats me up and I can't rock that anymore. Like I rode the Texas Giant about 10 years ago and thought my back was just done. Like I thought I'd never walk right again. It was a bad deal.
I think that's part of the experience of riding the Texas Giant, though, isn't it? You're supposed to feel a little broken after you get off of it, and just thank God that you didn't die on that. We'll see if we can send over some Ron DeSantis travel tips as you head down to the lovely state of Florida. It will be in Disneyland or Disney World, excuse me. That seems to be one of his favorite places. Before we get into kind of the Q&A of kind of everything, and we'll go open topic if you guys want to go there. Just in terms of Junior Day, I know that there was some stuff that you put on the board today, this morning or this evening rather, about Caleb Cunningham and maybe some confusion that was out there, and then just kind of lay out like I think there's a lot of people that obviously pay attention to Oklahoma recruiting and everything, but like, what is a Junior Day? What would be like, I guess the summary or like the overview of what happens on a Junior Day?
Yeah, so to start with your initial point about Caleb Cunningham, 5-star receiver from Mississippi, Oklahoma has tried for a while to get him down to campus, and earlier today, our own network On3 put out a graphic that he was going to be at Miami this weekend, and I checked with some Oklahoma sources to see if there had been a late change. Was told no, that doesn't sound right. And so I checked with Caleb, and Caleb was like, I'm going to Oklahoma. Like he was very flat out about it. So to get him on campus, I mean, this is a guy that, I know obviously Oklahoma's wide receiver class is already very strong with Jaden Nickens and Grayson Harris and Elijah Thomas. But this is the kind of guy you're going to make room for. You're going to find a way to get him into your class. So for Oklahoma to get him to come in, I think that's a huge win for Emmett Jones, and it's a sign of what we all know. Emmett's a very, very good recruiter, very skilled, and I think we all thought about Texas, but for him to bring this kid in from Mississippi, it's a great sign. But as far as the Junior Day itself, now they all vary because
Sure.
I think really OU in particular, obviously that's the one I'm most familiar with, does a good job of accepting that some of these kids go to multiple Junior Days even at the same school. So they try not to make it the same every time. One of the things that has changed is we know, in the Bob Stoops era, it always ended with a basketball game. It always ended up over at the Lloyd Noble, and that, guys could hang out as long as they wanted to. And, some guys, it was kind of a good litmus test. You'd know, okay, this guy stayed until the end of the game. That's a pretty good sign for OU. And then the guy that left mid first half, you're like, okay, maybe that's not gonna be the guy. But yeah, I mean, you're just gonna have the families gonna sit down with the coaches a lot of times. Really have a lot of one-on-ones. They're going to show them the facilities. They're going to tour. They're going to talk to different academic people that are going to be able to. And a lot of times Oklahoma, under Venables, does a good job catering. Like, we know this guy wants to major in business or finance or whatever it may be, and they're going to have some people around who kind of have a background in that, or, even a professor within that school to really sit down and talk with them. So, again, I think Oklahoma really does a nice job focusing in on each guy, and that's why they keep these events a little smaller. Like, I heard someone say Miami's expecting like 100 people. I don't even know how you manage that. Like, I don't know how that's even humanly possible to give the kids the kind of attention you want to give them.
That seems insane. 100 kids. There are going to be a number of Oklahoma commits. Owen Hollenbeck, the kid, the massive offensive lineman out of Melissa, Texas, former teammate of Nigel Smith. I'm sure that Nigel will be around this weekend to get him acquainted. Kamori Moore, which is kind of interesting it seems like that's almost a taboo school to talk to or talk about with him coming out of Lee Summit North. And I think Oklahoma fans well-documented displeasure with some of the things that happened out of there in the 2024 recruiting cycle. Alex Shieldknight, who I went up and saw, during the state playoffs as Wagner rolled into the state championship game, ultimately, I believe, losing to Blanchard in the 4A state title. So, as well as Kevin Sperry, Elijah Thomas, and, it should be noted that there's another Oklahoman in there in Tristan Haynes, who is kind of often a little bit forgotten about when you're talking about that entirety of what that is at Carl Albert, the two-time defending state champion, now that they've added I think 13 gold balls to their trophy case over there.
I think it
might be more than that. It might be
I want to say
17.
17 or 18.
Yeah, I was going to say. I discounted them.
Because I think they've won 6 of the last 7 or 7 of the last 8, like some crazy number like that.
Coach Dunn has it rolling.
Yeah. But you mentioned Tristan Haynes, and I couldn't agree more. I think because he's the lone guy that's not committed to OU on that roster amongst their kind of elite high-end prospects, people kind of forget about him. But I'm telling you, if you talk to certain people, they will tell you that guy may have as much upside as anybody on that roster. And you're talking about 4 or 5 OU commitments, depending on, what time of year you're talking about with Xavier Robinson. So there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of guys that can really play, but Tristan Haynes and we saw him, guys, at OU summer camp. He's 6'1.5", 6'2", real long-armed, can run for days, is a good track guy. There is a lot you like there. I would say almost physically there's some comparison with Jocelyn Malaska, the kid that just transferred in from Utah. That was a Bethany product. More refined. Jocelyn obviously was a guy that kind of came late to football and those sort of things. But Tristan is very physical and was a guy that I know from what I was told talking to some people at Carl Albert, when OU went and first saw him, it was just basically, can we justify offering this guy that hasn't played enough football yet? Like, they saw it. They could see all the physical tools and were like, we want to offer him, but we've got to figure out if we can make that make sense. And I think eventually they just said he's too good to not be all in on.
No doubt. It should be reminded, we talked about it on the Unofficial 40 yesterday on the podcast. Josh, you went and broke down all 39 of the new offers. There's been probably 7 or 8 new offers that were out just today over the last 24 hours with coaches out on the recruiting trail, making visits, doing some of the in-school visits to some of the prospective targets. So I'm sure that you've already put some stuff up on some of the places that Brent Venables was today, as well as where he's going to be here moving forward. So, all right, you want to get into some of these questions, George?
Let's do it. We got a lot of questions in the chat, which I can't read those as well. Will we get the Hatchet Brothers? That was the first one actually I wanted to get into. I know that there's been some rumblings about that. Josh, I know you've been kind of on top of that. Bob as well. I think Bob was actually the initial one to put something up on the board. But Josh, any update there with the 2 Hatchet Brothers? Obviously the 2 offensive linemen from Washington.
No, and I want to be real. I saw somebody, some guys, like, how this is. Sometimes I'll be doing something else. I'm like, I haven't checked on that in a little while. And I saw somebody, the first response when we put out, like, we're doing a live stream tonight, put your questions in. And so I hit up a couple people and frankly just haven't heard back. So maybe while we're doing this, I will hear back. But again, it is to me, it's a numbers game because I feel like if Oklahoma can find a way to take both, I think Oklahoma's in pretty good shape. Now, if they have to split up or go in different directions, I think that's still possible. But with what we know may come, obviously with Michigan now moving around, you wonder if that's going to free some spots up. You wonder if Kalen DeBoer is going to look at his situation and say, okay, we need some more offensive linemen or whatever it may be. There's some possibilities available to them, but I think I get the impression that they would like Oklahoma to be the choice because they're very familiar with Bill Bedenbaugh. They didn't really recruit Landon, the younger brother, as much as obviously they did his Garin. I'm just going to go with Garin. I know he's told me his name, but it's been years and I can't remember. But he really liked Oklahoma, and they had a lot of familiarity. So I think that can kind of get both of them to Norman, but Oklahoma's going to have to find a way to make that work.
And Garin, I think, did he start 11 games for Washington? I know he got hurt for part of the season, but he ended up starting the Pac-12 championship, the college football playoff semifinal game against Texas, and the national championship game at right guard, which obviously Oklahoma needs some interior offensive linemen.
And his younger brother was like their freshman standout or what, he won their award like for best freshman of the year or whatever it was. So I mean, he clearly is a guy Washington had belief in as well.
When you're talking numbers, and we'll get to Johnny's question here in a second, when you're talking numbers, that it's a numbers game for Oklahoma, I think that's something that we have talked about time and time again here during the portal season. Why wouldn't they have the numbers?
Well, I mean, you look at it now. So we sit at Oklahoma now as they head into spring football with, let's see, let me pull it up and make sure I say this right because I got off last time. 83 of their 85 scholarships are full going into the spring, and they have 7 more guys coming in. Now, I think we all expect Oklahoma's going to get a little creative with how they're going to use, whether it's NIL or maybe some guys, hey, this may not work out. I think you're still going to see, frankly, you're going to have to see movement. We know that's going to happen. But I think Oklahoma has a few ideas of how they're going to handle that. So, again, I think that space can be created, but I think people that look at it and say, well, Oklahoma just doesn't have enough of this. Yeah, they got a lot of bodies, though. I mean, their offensive line numbers may not be where they want, but I mean, guys, they have 8 scholarship safeties right now. Like that's a pretty full load. And if you have those 8, that takes away from a couple others. So again, you've got to make some decisions and decide what you want to do.
Who turns out to be the most impactful offensive line addition? And I'm going to take this as who is going to be the most impactful in 2024, or we could play it long term and say who's going to be the best player out of maybe this new group of guys. Josh.
You know what, Eddie? I'm gonna do something I never do. I'm gonna try to keep it brief, but I'm gonna answer both.
Okay.
I will say long term, I think you're talking about BJ Brooks. I think when you talk to people, there are people that think he could start next year. Like they legitimately think that's a possibility. So we'll see what happens. And you've seen now everything happen out of Under Armour. There's been a lot of rankings updates. On3 hasn't finalized theirs yet. But he's moved up in everybody's board. I think Rivals has him as the number 5 guard in the country right now. So he impressed a lot of people down there. But I think Oklahoma, again, saw it coming to a degree. But I would say as far as next year, I think it's Fabechi Nwewu. Like when you talk to people around North Texas, they think he's really good, like really, really good, and is a guy that's going to buy in. He's not going to get down there and have a problem with Jerry Schmidt or be an attitude guy or anything like that. He will fully engage himself in the way Oklahoma expects him to play, expects him to operate. And I fully expect him to be the starting right guard next year.
I think Fabechi is the right answer. I think the only other one that you could think of right now is Spencer Brown. And I do think he's gonna start for Oklahoma, but in terms of somebody that can be really impactful, I think Fabechi's the right answer. I'm gonna say Eddie Pierre-Louis for long term. I think his ceiling is maybe the highest of the group, and you just look at him and his traits and some of the things you hear about his skill set and his talent. I just think that eventually at some point, if he sticks around. I know his recruitment was pretty up and down, Josh, but if he sticks around, it feels like he's someone that could be the starting left tackle someday for Oklahoma and be a super impactful player.
If there is one of these recruits that's going to be let's just say a first or second day pick, Eddie Pierre-Louis is the choice that makes sense. Like that's absolutely, he is the guy with the most upside. Just for people that haven't, even if you've never watched tape before, just put in Eddie Pierre-Louis and type in Huddle, HUDL, find it, and just watch that guy run around. Like that's not normal at 330 pounds. Guys don't run like that.
Should be really interesting. And not to mention, like, I think somebody that we all three would agree that somebody like a Daniel Akinkunmi, it's basically a wait and see, and he could end up being really good. It's just going to be a matter of time and development and kind of buying into the system, which I don't think anybody has a problem or a thought that that's not going to happen. And you'll be able to watch it right there on his YouTube channel. Maybe one of the best brand builders in the class. Outside, it's going to be him or Daniel Okoye, I think, kind of battling between who builds their brand a little bit the most, I guess you could say here moving forward. All right, let's go to the next question. Cole wants to know, Zack Ally seems to be hitting the recruiting trail pretty hard. Any buzz on what he's like? George, you talked to his parents quite a bit in the story that you wrote for Soonerscoop.com, kind of getting to know him. You got to know, was it his former high school football coach as well?
Yes, yeah. I talked to his former high school football coach, talked to a couple people that were on staff at Clemson when he was just a student assistant. I mean, this is a guy that I think is a really good evaluator of talent. His role at Clemson was one that, they would send in tape and he would go through and say, these are the guys that I think that is worth your time, Brent, to go out and recruit for Clemson. So, and we all know how good of talent Clemson had during Brent Venables' run there. So I think that's one thing is you're going to see them. They're going to recruit really talented players. And then number two, I think he has this energy about him. Obviously, being a younger guy, he's only 30 years old. I think he's able to connect, and I think he's very passionate. And Josh could probably talk about that a little bit more, but it seems like they are really targeting some high-profile guys at linebacker.
Yeah, the thing that I noticed is he clearly started and said, I know where I want to start. Like he had several guys that Oklahoma had really no real relationship with that he's already working on visits for. But as far as what he's like, it's not going to surprise people that have heard all the Brent Venables comparisons, and this is just like a young Brent Venables. We've heard all that talk. When I talk to recruits, I'm like, what's he like? Like, I've never met the guy. Tell me about him. High energy, intense, very active, very excited, like excitable. Like it's all the things that you would think to describe Brent Venables, whether it was 20 years ago or right now. I mean, that is who he is. So again, I like for that article that Eddie mentioned earlier, I went over all those commitments. Well, there was a bunch of linebackers, a bunch of defensive guys that Ally 100% was kind of the spearhead on those offers. And man, I like them because they are violent, physical players. There's a couple of guys that I can't. I've gone back and watched a few more times just because I like watching how they play the game, and I think it very much fits what Oklahoma wants, what Brent Venables believes, and it makes sense that this is the guy. This is the guy that we knew Brent liked a couple of years ago, and now has gone ahead and brought in after he got a little chance to season himself at some other schools. So, he makes a ton of sense for Oklahoma, and I love what he's doing. The guys that he is offering are maybe a touch undersized. You're seeing a lot of 6'1", 6'2", kind of 205, 210 kind of guys, but that can really run. And that's what Brent Venables has always kind of built those defenses around.
I know that Eli Letterman had passed along, during the time of his hire as well, that he's a 4.5 handicap, which
somebody asked in the chat too what your handicap is.
13 something.
I mean,
probably closer to 14 these days.
It should be noted
15 maybe.
With that number,
I'll need strokes if we play. I know that.
With that number for Zack Ally, his dad was the chairman of the Wells Fargo golf tournament.
It's pretty cool.
So,
actually really cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to befriend this person and take him and at least go with him over to Augusta. Berkman's place. Been there. Have you?
No, I haven't.
Interesting. Let's keep it that way. Is Eddie an avocado toast guy? Yeah. I'll eat avocado toast. I don't have a problem with that. I don't disregard my toast. Now, it's probably not the number one thing that I would go for on a menu, but there's some places around Oklahoma City that probably have pretty good avocado toast if you want to spend like $15 on a slice of toast. Usually in the situation of avocado toast, though, avocado is a fun word to say. You're probably, in most settings, I would say that I'm usually on a liquid diet in that situation. And, we're talking about a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning and probably not eating a whole lot, taking a lot of Adderall and trying to get blackout by 4. So that's full disclosure what we're probably aiming for. I like how I can see all this thanks to Enjoy Vision as well. Free ad. What is the biggest change for home games in SEC for fans? Example, weird rule about moving student sections down towards the end zones. I honestly don't know. Outside of moving some of the sections that Oklahoma has already announced for the 2024 season, I am not sure. George, are you privy to the information?
I'm not.
I was told in my ear from the magnificent producer, Carrie Murdoch, that you had some intel on this.
I know that the student section is moving.
Sure.
But I think also the band and where the opposing fans will be, that will be different. But the biggest change is going to be that the opponents are going to be a lot better. That is the biggest change.
You should write some about that. That's breaking
but
news.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what
that's
exactly.
breaking news, George. I love it.
I don't know. I know that there's also been talk about the sidelines expanding, so they might take out some seats. Now, this wouldn't be this year. Yeah, but I know that there has been talk about a couple rows, removing a couple of the front rows to make.
You're talking about like
the sidelines,
to make them like actually bigger,
Correct.
the actual sideline.
Correct. Yeah. I know that that's been discussed, and you look at SEC fields, and a lot of them have bigger sidelines. There's more room on the sidelines.
Interesting. I had not thought about that. Go ahead, Josh.
In that vein, I have a question for Eddie. We all know SEC speed's a real thing. Eddie, on these kickoffs, are you concerned you're going to have the time to field them that you have in the Big 12? Like, is there a concern that the knee won't have time to be taken?
I think I'll be fine. I'm actually excited now that I know about the bigger sidelines. I'll have a little bit more room to move. Maybe I'll just actually break one off during the season. Wouldn't that be something for me to get banned from Tiger Stadium because I tried to return a kickoff? We'll see. Maybe we will. That's a little bit of foreshadowing. What are things the fans can do to be SEC ready? Asked Matt.
Bully the collective into more NIL money. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's just, more tailgating, things like that. I mean, I don't know, Eddie.
Sure.
I feel like the whole being SEC ready part for the fans has kind of been overblown.
It's a little bit of a bit.
Yes.
I think that's kind of at least how I take it.
OU fans are crazy. I mean,
yeah.
I think that when the team is good, they're into it. Now I think that,
just scroll through Message Board Genius,
Yeah.
and I think that Oklahoma fans are more than plenty ready for the SEC. It seems like too that I'm sure that the same things happen for Josh and George as well. When I go on some of these radio hits and stuff down in the Southeast, it's always interesting to me. It's like the question, and especially over the last year or so, has always been, what do Oklahoma fans think about the move? What are they ready for the move? All that kind of stuff. And I think that the fervor or the passion around this state in general for college athletics and specifically college football is about as equal as you can get to whatever's out there, within the SEC territory.
And I think when Lincoln left, it was a bit of a kick in the ass to the fan base.
Sure.
And I think people, you saw what they did at the spring game a couple years ago. I think that even moving to the SEC was a bit of a kick in the ass to the athletic department and the fan base. I mean, they've already sold out season tickets for next year. When's the last time that they did that? And it's because you look at the schedule. And I do think that OU fans are going to show up in masses for the games next year, and I think they're also going to travel well. I mean, OU has always historically traveled well as a fan base.
I think that is one of those things that we are such in this little bubble around Norman and Oklahoma football or Oklahoma athletics as a whole that you often forget. And I kind of forget about this, like when teams come into Norman, how historic it is in a way. And I think that we just kind of almost take it for granted that, we go down there 6-7 times a year for the games and you're just always wrapped up in it. But that was one of the things that, whether it be Tennessee, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Florida State back in 2011, it's Oklahoma fans have always traveled extremely well, and I think that, even more so moving into the SEC, that there's going to be a lot of these spots that a lot of people haven't been to before. I know that, when the schedule came out, it was almost a mad dash to get hotel rooms in Oxford, and I think that I've had some buddies that said it's already sold out. Like, you are going to probably have to stay in Memphis if you're going to the Ole Miss game. So, yeah, I think that fans are ready. I do think that just the tenor within the stadium might be a little bit different. I know that, Oklahoma fans, I'm sure, have gone through it in Lubbock and places at Stillwater, obviously, places that, Oklahoma certainly isn't welcomed at. But I do think that it's going to be a little bit different when, you're headed down to, Oxford. I don't know about Oxford, but Baton Rouge, wherever.
Yeah, and we'll get to this. We'll get to this next question just right after this point. I'm going to say, but I think we talk a lot. Be good. We talk a lot about the game day atmosphere at OU, and I don't think it's necessarily bad. It's just not great, and it can be better. And I will also say this. I know when I went to the Board of Regents meeting a couple of weeks ago, they are discussing opening even more tailgating spots. I know they opened back up Lindsay Street this year, but there is more discussions of places that they might open more tailgating. We'll see.
Need to have better attendance. I am interested to see just like kind of as a whole what the game day atmosphere is going to be like when some of these teams, whether it be Tennessee or
Tennessee's
Alabama,
the first real big one,
And we talked about it when the schedule was released and the actual dates were released. I think on one of the YouTube shows, just in terms of you're talking about some of these games are going to be the biggest games that Norman has had. Maybe a decade, just in terms of
probably Ohio State.
Yeah,
came to town,
which was 2016, right?
So
it's crazy. I'm excited for it.
And guys, the other thing, just real briefly, because I know we want to move on, but it's also going to help to not have so many 11 a.m. kickoffs, guys. You're going to have more tailgating, more time for everybody to get in the spirit of things, however you want to term that. But that's going to help. I mean, you're going to have more people a little sauced up. And guys, we watch those, you watch those SEC night games, in Tuscaloosa or Baton Rouge. There's not a soul in that stadium that isn't 3 beers deep at least. So that's what you're talking about. Like that's how that's a good way to create a little atmosphere that maybe doesn't exist at 11 a.m. in Norman.
I think the first time that like a elderly lady tells somebody to F themselves wherever they may be, whether it be Knoxville or, Auburn or wherever, I think that'll be one of the first reminders, like not exactly in Lawrence anymore. Although I know Oklahoma lost there. Whatever. Jeff Levy's fault. We can say that again, right? Cole Dixon writes in, is BV destined? And by the way, if Jeff, I'm sure that you're watching. Peace. Is BV destined to be a DC acting like a head coach, or will he ever evolve into a true CEO head ball coach? I mean, I think is that not like one of the biggest question marks going into 2024 with the hire of Zack Ally?
Yeah, it is. And I still think that this is a move long-term that eventually, maybe Zack Ally's calling plays or somebody else is calling plays. I don't know if that's going to happen necessarily next year, but this is still a move in a lot of ways that's going to free up Brent to do some of this stuff. I mean, I'm sure Brent was really leading the charge, and Josh can definitely answer this. Like, he was probably leading the charge on most of the linebacker recruiting the last couple years, I would assume, whereas now Zach can kind of take that over, and obviously Brent's going to have his hand in that, and same with the game planning and call sheets and all that stuff. But I do think that the Zack Ally hire signals that he understands at some point he has to take a back seat in terms of being the defensive play caller and becoming a CEO head coach.
Yeah, I agree completely, George. It feels like Brent knows it needs to move in that direction. Whether it fully goes there this year, I couldn't say. Now, it's possible. I know, like we talked about earlier, there's a lot of faith in Zack Ally. This isn't a guy that OU just kind of settle on. This is a guy Brent's wanted from day one. So there's a lot that makes sense there. I think he knows that's where this goes. I mean, guys, we've talked about it on the pod. We've talked about it on here. Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, you go down the list. Those guys have DCs that run their defense. Now, they help and they manage and they're involved in all of it. But on the day of the game, there's one guy running the ship and everybody knows who it is.
I think it's a big difference to it. I will say that. I think that, like, what Brent did in year number 2 and what Oklahoma did in year number 2, there were significant steps made in some of the stuff that didn't go so well year 1. I would say that, like, his self-evaluation is very real, very honest with himself. Yeah. But there is a difference in being honest with yourself, and then once game day hits and that old instinct kicking in and you haven't, or being able to step back. And maybe more so that happens during the week, during practice and stuff like that. I don't know, though. It's a great question, Cole. I think that is something that we're going to talk about, probably truly until August when camp begins.
And hopefully we'll find out maybe some in March, too, when we get to talk to Zack Ally.
Great question from Mr. John. Will Justin Harrington get a medical waiver? I think that is something that I kind of thought was going to be a known by now. I thought that was something that they would get wrapped up, especially after Alan Bowman was granted his 7th year of eligibility up in Stillwater. I thought that was, and it seems like, and I'm definitely not somebody that is well-versed in what goes into this type of decision, but it seems like this is something that should be pretty cut and dry, should it not?
Yes. I mean, what did he play? He got hurt in the SMU game, so he played, 3 games last year. So I would assume he's going to get it, but the NCAA is weird about that stuff. You never know, what they're going to do. But I don't know why we haven't heard yet. I know that, I reached out to some folks, what was that, a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, and they hadn't heard anything. So I haven't heard anything else other than that. So, and I don't even know if he's like going through winter workouts right now or what's going on. But, I mean, hopefully we find out something soon. And I know OU really wants him to get it because they still believe he could play a super valuable role for them next year at Cheetah.
Just in terms of like him actually being cleared for winter workouts and stuff like that, or not winter workouts, I guess it would be early January,
Spring,
whatever workouts. I can't say that he's been cleared, but I do think that he's still around Norman. I mean, just going back to the bowl game, he was down there in San Antonio with the entire team and was a very, I think vocal member of, at least in the limited time that we were out at practice. Should be rather interesting. And I would be pretty surprised if he wasn't granted that 7th or, extra year of eligibility through the medical hardship. Josh?
And Bowman was what? 3 weeks ago now? Like that feels like that was a while. Yeah. And I mean, guys, the only question I have I don't really know how that application works. Is that something you have to wait until after the season to do? Or is that something when Justin Harrington goes down in September, you can say, hey, we know we want to bring him back and we'll go ahead and file whatever we need to. It feels like whatever it is, OU should have been at the head of the line as far as timeline.
I think you can apply at any point, but you won't hear back until after the season. Like I think the NCAA just kind of goes through their list wherever you are. I don't know how the pecking order is for that. Again, and maybe he's already gotten cleared. I'm not exactly sure.
NCAA
when the one kid got his 9th year, I can't imagine a world where Justin Harrington couldn't get his 7th.
Especially when you think about his story too, and how many times he's been hurt and playing JUCO and redshirting and walking back on the team. Like I don't know how he would not get it.
A smart-minded person would think that should be like Justin Harrington should be the poster child of what the NCAA wants a student athlete to be. But then again, they're probably too busy chasing down gambling rings out of Baton Rouge. Next question, please. Matt wants to know, does OU still plan on upgrading football facilities? I think this would be in your expertise, Mr. George.
Yes, they do. I just think it's on the back burner. I think that they realize that their priorities are elsewhere, whether it's NIL or things of that nature. That is at the forefront. That is where the donors' money is honestly going, is there. I think that there's still some stadium renovations. Like I said earlier, I think that removing some of the front rows there is in consideration. And I also think, you talk about the west side that's been on the back burner for a while. So I think that's going to happen at some point. It just may be a while until it actually happens. And we haven't heard anything at any Board of Regents meeting. It brought back up and being officially kind of cleared for those kind of plans and architects and all that stuff. So I think that's going to happen, but it may be a while. It's
never been a coincidence that, if OU goes and wins 10, 11 games, gets to a college football playoff or something next season in 2024 in the SEC, it's always kind of non-coincidental the way that those checks start rolling in if the program starts playing better on the
and I'll also say that I think OU has really good facilities as it is, and so I don't think it like some kid is saying, "Well, I'm not going to OU because it's not nice enough." I don't think that is an issue currently.
That's never come up with you, Josh.
I've never heard that. Not one time have I ever heard a kid say the locker room's not nice enough. I'm not going there. Like, they are very nice facilities. They're not incredibly dated or anything like that. I know we all heard the stories like when Bob Stoops arrived, how outdated everything had become. It's not like that by any stretch of imagination. We get, obviously, guys, we get to walk around a lot of that during the summer and that kind of stuff, see what all that is. And I guess that's my exposure to it. I know you guys see even more than I do. But it's very nice. There's nothing wrong with any of it. And guys, one of the things that's interesting that I don't think, people kind of say, oh, well, this is going to take a while. The renovations that are probably needed are all kind of big ticket items. Yeah. So I think you're going to have to see a few years of budget building and then building some of that. But when you're talking about the kind of paychecks they're about to start pulling in the SEC, that stuff all becomes a lot more feasible because you've been operating on an X budget, and now you're going to be living on X times 2. Like, it's just a very different world.
It's like what Eddie said too. If you go make the playoff and maybe you win a game or you make a run at the national title, or you win the SEC in the next few years, which would be crazy. Not saying it's impossible, but say that happens, all of a sudden the money comes flying in.
Drill, baby, drill. Oil, good for Oklahoma football. All right, next question. Will Joe C's legacy be tarnished by the lack of football national championships? I don't think so.
I mean, look, if he retired, here's the thing. If he retired tomorrow, he would probably go down as one of the greatest athletic directors that the NCAA has seen in the last, 20-some years?
Sure. I think it's one of those things that oftentimes, again, we get caught in this bubble and we look solely at Oklahoma football or Oklahoma basketball or, Oklahoma baseball not being able to get to, not being able to win a baseball national championship. Obviously, these teams want to get there, but I think as a whole, when you look at what the athletic program is, it's very successful. And it's one of the, self-sustaining programs or, athletic departments in the country. He's done a phenomenal job. Sure, are there things that people are going to nitpick and say that they want here or there within each program, whether it be a new arena for the basketball program or, a new baseball stadium? There are things that I think, certainly take care of themselves if you continue to win at the level that some of these teams are. I don't think, though, that to say it would be tarnished, I certainly, don't think that would be accurate. I also don't know to a certain extent, as far as I know, Joe Castiglione doesn't make a whole lot of decisions come Saturday if you're going to, direct snap to Javonte Barnes, who hadn't played in, 3 of the 4 games before they went to Stillwater, stuff like that. Seriously, I don't think that football national championships are somehow just all of a sudden equated to the athletic director.
I mean, he did hire the most winningest coach
fair.
in the.
Talking about Bob.
Yeah, well, I'm just it's if you want to put blame on him, the last let's say it doesn't work out with Brent, then yeah, of course. I mean that would tarnish somewhat of his career. But if it does work out with Brent, then that would go to. I mean, I think it's too early to say, but right now when you look at his resume again, if he were to retire in the next 5 minutes. I mean, he hired the winningest coach in program history. What was he supposed to do? Just move on from Bob Stoops because they lost the 2008 Orange Bowl or because they lost to USC that one year? I mean, in 2004 and 2003 to LSU, all these years, it's man, that is, I don't know. I think that he's done a pretty damn good job as the athletic director. And you have to look at it as a whole, too. He's not just managing football. I know everybody wants to look at football,
sure.
But look at what they've built on softball, obviously. The run they had.
The hire you made in golf with Ryan Hibble.
The women's gymnastics program, the men's gymnastics program.
I think the one thing that you could just boil it down to that I think sometimes, again, that Oklahoma fans certainly get caught up in, it's just the consistency year in and year out, and especially when you hear his peers talking about what Joe Castiglione has done. I mean, we're not too far removed, and I'm sure that if the conversation ever comes up again talking about a college football commissioner, it's Joe C's name that always comes up in those types of discussions.
Right.
Well, guys, he's made 4 coaching hires. 3 of them are the most important, or the 3 of the 5 most successful winning percentage coaches in the history of the school. And
Damn.
when I say 3, people are looking at me funny. I know. But you have to remember, Bob Stoops as an interim in 2021 counts as a one-off. That's 1,000%. Man
That's
never
true.
lost a game as the head coach of the 2021 Oklahoma Sooners. But, yeah, I mean, you guys, you're 846 for Lincoln Riley. Hate him all you want. The guy had a lot of success, and Joe didn't waste a minute hiring him. Like that guys, we talked about it the other day. There goes Bob out one door, and in comes Lincoln in the next. Like, we were there. Like, it was crazy how that all played out. And then you've got Bob Stoops, who was just a hair under 800 in his career. The only 2 people that are even close, I guess there's 3, were Harrington before football was anything like what we recognize, Bud Wilkinson and Barry Switzer. So, I mean, again, there's been – I don't think there's probably not been any run that Oklahoma's had like the last 25 years that's been this level of consistent, even if it hasn't quite reached the finish line like so many OU fans obviously and understandably would want.
There's also not been many athletic directors at schools stick around this long. I mean, look across the
100%,
country, how many schools are having to hire, a new athletic director every few years or every other year. I mean, Arizona's going through it. Washington went through it recently. I mean,
A&M's going to have to go through it with
Exactly.
Ross Bjork going up.
I was
to,
going to say Ohio State just went through it.
I mean, the continuity
and made
aspect
a
is
bizarre hire.
Yeah, they did.
Fundraiser, I guess. We'll see. Let's go to a lighthearted question is what I've been told. Let's discuss best restaurants in Norman, Oklahoma. Thoughts? Sad to see Penny Hill go. R.I.P. Bingo night. Terrible news. I was not aware that they were closing. I think that story was reported on by the OU Daily last week, and then all of a sudden it was like, not only are they closing, today's their final day. So definitely rest in peace to Penny Hill. That is one of the just that location, whether it be Penny Hill or Toby Keith's place moved in after Texadelphia left, which I was familiar with. Nothing better than a big sexy on Thursday night watching college football back in the day. But George, what is the go-to spot in Norman for you?
Well, I think we have 2 different generations here because you guys grew up on Penny Hill. I never really went to Penny Hill when I was in college, but for me, I love the library. Mm-hmm. I think the library's amazing.
I will take it to my grave. I think one of the greatest deals in the city, the Sunday pizza for like $5. I think they still do it. It's an underrated pizza at that. Go sit on the bar. And I think that the library has one of the most underrated patio scenes in the city as well.
It's very good. I love Midway Deli. You and I eat a lot of Midway Deli.
Had it today.
I think Pickleman's is really good.
Interesting that you picked that.
Why is that, Eddie?
I find it interesting.
Not there too late. But Pickleman's is good.
Particularly in the summer of 2016. Were you there? Is that what you're saying? Is it time
not.
to cop to what?
I was living in my apartment. I like Ocon's. I think Ocon's not for food necessarily, more of just an atmosphere.
I'll tell you what, man.
They have good food, but like it's not like I'm like, oh, I really want to go get an Ocon's burger today.
I went over there the other night. My parents go down there, if they're down here for basketball games and stuff. I met them over there before the West Virginia game last week. The $5 burger.
It's good.
But
is it the best burger in town?
I kind of find it to be like and this might be a little bit of a slander, but I kind of think it's a little bit like Brahms. Like, I don't think that I would want it every week, but if you have it once a month or something, maybe it's a little bit of nostalgia too. You probably don't remember this, George. Josh, you probably remember this. You could do pizza in a pitcher over at O'Connell's when it was over on Lindsay Street. It was like one of the great institutions on Monday night to go over there. They had awesome pizza.
That was an early Tiffany and Josh dating was over at O'Connell's playing beer pong over there a couple of times. So that was absolutely a fixture for me. It's still weird for me that O'Connell's is not on Lindsay. Now, okay, I have to have an old moment here. O'Conn's, is that actually the name of it, or am I just not cool enough to shorten it?
No, that nobody calls it that except I think George and his people.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think it's the Youngs.
We never
the Youngs.
We never called it that.
Yeah,
but that's okay.
That's all we call. I mean, I still. I mean, my parents literally met at O'Connell's, so like I still call it O'Connell's, but most of my friends call it O'Conn's.
I miss O'Connell's.
Okay.
What about Bienvenuti? Is that on the short list? If you're looking for a little bit of a nicer spot, they got the ranch down here now.
The Winston's good.
Awesome.
The Winston's not like
I think
it's nice,
good.
but it's not like super nice dining.
I'll throw two more out and then we'll move on. One, got to give Ray's a shout out. I think it's one of the better barbecue spots in Norman. That's the place that I would send anybody if they were ever asking to come into Norman to go to get some barbecue. And then the other one I completely forgot, so we can move on. I was going to bring up a really good point. Damn it.
Chipotle?
Well, that's everywhere.
I eat a lot of Chipotle on Campus Corner.
City Bites is more of a I think that's an Oklahoma City thing as well. What were you saying, Josh?
Yeah, I grew up. I was just George going with Chipotle. Like it's like a little Norman treasure.
Have you ever heard of this place called Chipotle?
Volare.
Volare is good.
Volare is really good.
It's kind of a fun hang too.
Yeah, it's a good spot. They've got good pizza.
Now, Josh, I know that you're anti-pizza shuttle, right?
Oh, me too.
I'm not.
I am.
Anti is strong. I just wasn't as addicted to it when I was in school as everybody else was. Like it didn't hit for me in the same way.
Maybe it was just
now,
with
guys,
the people
I'm
that
shocked.
I was hanging out
Now,
with that we were so hungry at 3:00.
I mean, yeah, and look, I ate it
not,
like that, but yeah. Go ahead, Josh.
I'm never in Norman anymore. We all know. Like you guys are much more aware of what's there now. But I'm shocked Terrahumaras hasn't come up at all. Like for Norman, that's solid Mexican. I miss some of the old places like Border Crossing was one of my favorites when I was in school.
Never went there. Never even was on my radar. I think that was gone even by the time I got here.
Wow, that's probably right, Eddie. I was pretty young. I used to go even before that because I would go with my kind of like you're talking about with your parents at O'Connell's. Like I would go with my dad and that kind of stuff. But also the Mont. The Mont is always a place for me.
But even the Mont though, like the Mont is good, but it's more of a for me it's like Ocon's. It's an atmosphere. Like that's what that brings. Whereas like if you're talking like pure food, like I would pick a few other places over the Mont.
Those first couple weeks during this spring semester when it starts getting nice out and it's like, I'm definitely not going to class today. Yeah. And you go and have a couple swirls over on the Mont patio. That's when things are right.
Rest in peace, Aussies.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I did see, I think the OU Daily also reported there is going to be a new breakfast spot over at Max Westheimer.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if it's a buffet style like Aussies was.
That'd be awesome.
It would be. All right, I'm being told that a couple more serious questions that we'll jump back into on the Oklahoma athletic side of things. Daniel Ford wants to know who's got the most athletic head on the team right now.
That's a very serious question.
It's a great question. I would maybe even have to defer to Kerry Murdoch. I think he is our resident expert on athletic head. Pause.
Seth Luttrell has a very
I thought you were just going to say head and really go for it.
I wanted to put Seth. I'm being told that Seth Luttrell might be the winner. I did get a kick out of some of the pictures that he's been in and visiting some of the high schools. Looks like he's still keeping Copenhagen in business.
You know who has a pretty athletic head is Javonte Barnes. He's a good athletic head.
What about his feet? Does he have athletic feet? I think that's probably the biggest question moving into 2024.
I don't know who else.
I don't know.
I mean,
like what makes an athletic head?
This is a Kerry Murdoch question. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, this is a Kerry special. Does he want to vote from your earpiece there, Eddie?
Do you have a vote, Kerry? Are you going with Seth Luttrell?
I would say
he needs to study the roster.
I've got to go Jay Valai, right?
Jay Valai's got a good head.
Yeah. This conversation just.
I love how we prefaced it with this is a serious question.
Kerry said that Brent Venables has the head of a marathon runner. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. I help out, do some stuff, some radio stuff over at the Oklahoma City Memorial Marathon. That's about as close as I get to marathons, probably over the course of 365. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody.
Tiffany's run a couple of halves. I've got some buddies that run it every year. And the guys who are serious about it, yeah, like I could see what he's talking about because I've got one who's actually very good at the marathons and has finished fairly highly up a few times. And I can absolutely see what carries. Like it's just there's not an ounce of water remaining in Brent's body. Like it's all just pure protein and muscle.
I still think it's really funny that it was his first season here. And it was like middle of August. I think we were doing preseason interviews. It might have even been like media day. And we look out in the middle of the stadium or in the stadium, and he's literally running stadium stairs by himself. I know that the video got out there on the internet, but it was just like, I mean.
He drinks a lot of energy drinks too, right?
Yeah, I think so. All right, next question. Give me an OU player we're not talking about enough for 2024. Really good question because I think that there are some guys that are really intriguing moving into 2024. Now, it's like maybe one of the first guys that comes to mind is Lewis Carter or is Samuel Omosigo. I just don't know how they fit into Oklahoma's defense in 2024 because of the incumbents that are coming back at those particular positions.
Omosigo's a good one because I think he's somebody that could really push for that cheetah role. Like they started to play him a little bit towards the end of the year, and we saw that, you know, they had to kind of rotate Kendall Dolby and Dasan McCullough because McCullough wasn't as good in coverage, and Kendall Dolby could come in and do some different things. Samuel Omosigo, I think he's super athletic. I think he's a smart kid. I think he can pick things up quickly. I wouldn't be shocked if in the spring we're hearing his name a bunch, and then in the fall we're hearing him maybe pushing somebody for a starting spot.
Josh?
And man, I would love it for that kid with all he went through, like his mom, the whole thing like that. He's I can't wait for you guys to really get to talk to him frequently and be around him. He's just an awesome kid. One of my favorites the last few years. I would say probably one that's more perfectly fits the question is Robert Spears Jennings. I don't think he ever gets his credit. I think he's a really good football player, very physical. And I know everybody just kind of says, well, Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen are going to be your starters. I don't know that that's the case. Like I think Robert has a very real chance to be a starter next year. And now they're going to rotate because Peyton Bowen's too good. You got to get him on the field as often as you can. The other guy I would say, just because I don't think he ever gets his due, is Kendall Dolby. I love Kendall Dolby. All that kid does is make play after play after play, and no one ever seems to talk about him as one of Oklahoma's better players. And I would say, for me, he's in the top 10 of returning players on this team. Like I think Kendall Dolby is fundamentally important to that defense.
How about R. Mason Thomas?
Certainly. I mean, I think that he's a guy that, like, when you look back at 2023, it just kind of was incomplete because he was injured for so long with both of those ankles. It was such a weird deal. I would even throw out, you're talking about Robert Spears Jennings. How about another Oklahoman? Jacoby Johnson, I think, is a guy that we have talked about time and time again on the Unofficial 40 as a guy that when you look at the quarterback position, and certainly with Woody and Gentry coming back, they should certainly be in the mix. And some of the young guys, whether it be I guess not technically young, but Kenai Walker or, Josiah Wagner, who was kind of the buzz of August and then never really got that much of an opportunity because of some of the injuries at the beginning of the season. It certainly should be interesting. What about the offensive side of the ball for you guys?
That's tougher because I feel like we kind of have, other than the offensive line,
there's a lot of knowns, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, like wide receiver, you could throw out a Jaden Gibson, but I think we all think Jaden Gibson's going to be a great player, and we're talking about him. I'm trying to think.
What about Jaquez Petaway?
Yeah, that's a good one. I just don't know. Like it's one of those things where it's like they have so many guys. I think I would say Andrew Anthony is one that it's like we're maybe not talking enough about because people forget. Maybe they don't forget, but I forgot as the season went on, like how important he was to this team. I mean, he was their guy on third down. He was their deep threat. And I do think like his injury, we kind of glossed over it a bit at the time. And it ended up being a big loss for him, especially because he was Dylan Gabriel's go-to guy. Like, I'm wondering, what does he look like next year? I just, when you bring up Petaway, it's like, where does he fit in the room? Because you bring in Deion Burks, you have Jalil Farouk back, you bring back Nick Anderson, Jaden Gibson, Brennan Thompson, who's starting to come on late in the year. I think that room is just so loaded.
guys, the one I would say is, for me, it's Cade McIntyre at tight end. Like,
Yeah.
I think he obviously got hurt almost immediately, but I can't get that play he made against Arkansas State out of my head. And I know it's one play early in the season against a wildly overmatched opponent, but I remember I was out of the room and I kind of come back in because I think at this point it was already like 56-0. It was wildly out of hand. And I remember coming back into the room and I was like, who is that big white wide receiver? Like, I couldn't place him. And then, like, because I'm watching him run, I'm like, that's a receiver. And then it's like, oh, it's Cade McIntyre that's 225 pounds. And you're like, holy crap. Like, that guy can really, really move even amongst other Division I athletes. So, again, we all know that tight end needs somebody to step up. I really like the Bauer Sharp kid as well. Devon Mitchell, I think we all know, is kind of, the next guy as far as what we all expect. But I think Cade McIntyre is more interesting than other people maybe give him credit for.
There's more than just one player for you, Eric. How about another one? What do you think of CNC's latest attempt at advertising? And talking about Crimson and Cream, I would imagine, not the Crimson Corner. Crimson and Cream, the OU collective. Would it make sense to get some signage at OU events or booths to help with the signups? I think to answer your question, I would start with yes. Absolutely. I think that yesterday was probably a step in the right direction in terms of, George, was that the first time that Oklahoma Athletics has ever tweeted out, hey, this is the collective that you need to be? I know that we've been trying to tell people on the Crimson Corner on SoonerScoop.com that Crimson and Cream is the Oklahoma collective if you're looking to donate.
I think it was really the first time that they've been so direct about it. I think that there's been a couple times where maybe they've retweeted it, one of their fundraising pushes, but to be that direct, I mean, they sent out a press release to the media about it as well, I think was a huge step in the right direction. I think things that you want to see them do now is, get videos out there of a Brent Venables or a Joe Castiglione or Patty Gasso, whoever it is, and they come out and support, and they're like, hey, we really need you guys to donate to this collective, and here's how you do it. You look across the country, Missouri's doing that. Eli Drinkowitz is up on the big screen during football games saying, hey, you guys need to donate to this collective. Alabama's doing it with Yay Alabama. That's what you're going up against going into the SEC, and we've seen the NIL stuff play out these last few weeks. And Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma's doing a better job than people want to give them credit for in the NIL realm, but I do think in terms of marketing and fundraising, those are certainly things that the university can do a better job of, and I think they realize that. I think that's them kind of showing that they understand that they do need to be better. So I think that those are kind of the next steps, like you mentioned, signage, things like that. But I think, look, like, what if they put out a video at the end of the third quarter with Brent Venables, up there saying a 30-second segment saying, hey guys, here's the QR code to go donate. I mean, that would be huge if you were to do that, at the end of the third quarter against Tennessee or whoever, each football game.
We get to $500,000. Maybe they won't blow a timeout in the first 2 minutes of the second half or something. That'd be fun.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine though, like you put up the QR code in the stadium and everybody in the stadium, the 80,000 OU fans there, donate $1. I mean,
sure.
$80,000, that goes a long ways when you talk about some of this stuff.
No doubt. That is a good question. And it's something that, I think has come up more and more here over the last month. I feel like that's all we've done on the Unofficial 40 podcast is talk about NIL and Oklahoma's efforts and trying to kind of break down into the simplest of terms of what it is and who it is and where the money goes and, what you need to do. It's, I think, very confusing, but I do think pushing and moving trajectory-wise in the right direction. Okay, this might be a Josh special. Higher ceiling, Eugene Brooks or Daniel Akinkunmi? Talking about two of the most recent Oklahoma signees.
Yeah, and a couple of guys that I, again, had a chance to watch up close at Under Armour less than a month ago. I would have to say Akinkunmi. He's a little bigger. He's a little longer. It's one of those things where if tackle doesn't work out for him, he can slide into guard. He's got a big enough base. And I always like guys that basically have a fallback position. If things, for Brooks, he could move to center or guard, and that's fine. It's nice that he has that too. but it's not really going to increase value or what you would talk about with ceiling. So I think with Akinkunmi, he could be a tackle, and that's obviously the premier position along the offensive line. And I think he has some traits that tell me that can work, that can be a thing. And I know a lot of people would say, well, can he be a left tackle? We've talked about that before. Bill Bedenbaugh doesn't value that in the same way that some do, that your most athletic guy has to be your left tackle or your big road grader has to be your right tackle. That's not really the way look at Tyler Guyton was a right tackle, and probably with the exception of Lane Johnson, is the most athletically gifted tackle we've seen play at Oklahoma in the last 20 years. So I think that's a little different conversation. But Akinkunmi would be the one because, like I said, just a little bigger, a little longer. I mean, B.J. Brooks is probably 6'2", 320, which is more than good enough to be a very, very good guard and be or a center, whatever it may be. But when you talk about ceiling and, I think you kind of get into the conversation of NFL potential and some of those sort of things. I think it limits him a little bit.
Sure. That's a really good question. And obviously projecting into the future of what that could be. But if Eugene Brooks is a guy that ends up being a starter on this team in 2024, that would certainly be exciting. Not only, I think, for him, but, for the future of the offensive line. I think that would kind of settle things, obviously, in the interior. Couple more questions we'll get through here. Welcome in if you're just joining us. We're getting towards the end of what could be something that we do more and more, especially here throughout, the spring and then on into the summer. There'll be plenty to talk about here. I'll say it again. We're going to be talking about spring football here before too long as Oklahoma, starts up that spring semester. So what's the next question we got, Kerry? Okay. If you want to get your question in, we will be sure to get to it here before we get out of here this evening. Should Josh take Ron DeSantis' advice? Oh, no, that's never mind. Who's been the better recruiter? Ooh, this is a really good question. Who's been the better recruiter? Brandon Hall or Emmett Jones? And I think that maybe if you don't follow it very closely, you would just immediately go Emmett Jones. And I'm not taking anything away from it. But what Brandon Hall has done, that resume is starting to stack up. And it is a very interesting question, Josh.
It really is. And, if you would have told me at the time Brandon Hall was hired that this would be the case, I wouldn't have believed it. Now, it's not to say that I didn't think Brandon Hall was going to be a capable recruiter. I didn't think he was going to be I didn't think. I wondered if he could be a guy that would land elite guys. Well, in year one, he gets Peyton Bowen, one of the most, pursued safeties that Oklahoma that I can remember in 20 years of covering Oklahoma recruiting. That was a guy that wasn't just a guy, they fought to the end and they wanted. From day one, I can tell you he was OU's guy. That was the guy they wanted. And Peyton Bowen, and they fought and fought and fought, and we all know that story. Now, you fast forward a couple of years, and that room has been just completely overhauled. I mean, you've got guys like Boganowski. There's so much talent that Reggie Powers is a guy that I don't think is getting enough credit. Reggie Powers, I very much expect to be a very, very good football player. I've said before, there was one guy in that class I was going to bet my money on being like an all SEC kind of guy. Reggie Powers would be my bet. Like, I just believe his ceiling is high, but his floor is also very high. I just don't see a way he's not successful. And then now you've got him chasing Jonah Williams. But with Emmett, it's been a huge early start. Talk about overhauling a room. I mean, he's really rebuilt that receiver room. To this point, I have to give the edge to Brandon Hall because there are a lot of guys that can land at a place like Oklahoma that can land 4 stars and land quality players. There aren't a lot of guys anywhere that go and land 5 stars. And I think twice in 3 years, Brandon Hall has a very real chance to do that with, like I said, Peyton Bowen. And then if he can reel in Jonah Williams, who's another guy who will be in Norman this weekend for the junior day, one of the few junior days he's going to. He's coming up to Oklahoma for like his 4th or 5th trip. So Oklahoma's in great shape there. And again, I think in time, this may level because I think Emmett Jones is going to land elite guys. I don't want it to be misunderstood. But if I'm just going on what they've done to date, I have to side with Brandon Hall a little bit.
It's a really good discussion. Thank you, Drew. That's a very, very good question. Moving right along, we're probably I don't know how much longer we're gonna go.
Let's
Maybe
go all
2
night.
or 3 hours.
Let's go until we get 100,000 subscribers.
This would be like the Jersey Jerry thing. We would be here literally all night and maybe all weekend and then maybe into next week. Here you go, Carrie. If everyone had to pick one running back, who's our 1,000-yard rusher next season? Really good question, and especially out of position and a position group that I think left us speechless and kind of mindless multiple times. Let's start with you, George.
I think it's got to be Gavin Sawchuk. Of all the guys that we've seen, I mean, he's the most proven. Now, I do think that people aren't talking enough about Sam Franklin, who they brought in from UT Martin. I think
he was a guy that, and we talked about when he committed, and then I think we talked about it on one of the recruiting shows with Josh. He was a guy that they identified early in the process.
I don't know if he'll rush for 1,000 yards, but I do think he's going to be a bigger contributor than maybe people realize. Like, I think he's going to play a little bit for OU. And then it's just, what is Javonte Barnes going to look like next year? I think that it's kind of a question mark of what happened there. But for right now, of all the guys in that room, I think you have to pick Gavin Sawchuk. Taylor Tatum, we'll see, if he gets some playing time next year. Obviously, the number one running back in the country. But of everybody that we've seen, I think you have to go with Gavin.
What say you, Josh?
Yeah, I think Sawchuk is the choice you have to make. Now, I will say, if there comes a point in the year when Taylor Tatum gets a start and say it's by Texas week, I would probably change my vote because I think Tatum has that kind of talent that if he can ever kind of, find a crack in playing time and carries and all the things you'd need to hit a number like that, I could see him being the guy that doesn't let go of it. I mean, he's that talented because I've watched all of these guys in high school, and Taylor Tatum's the most talented running back OU has on the roster. Like I don't even think it's that huge of a question. He is very gifted. And again, Eddie, you remember, I was a huge Javonte Barnes guy. That's the thing that confuses me about all of this. I thought if you'd have told me a year ago I would be answering Sawchuk to this question and not Javonte Barnes, I would not have believed that possible. I've got to figure out what's going on there. Like we said, we got to make sense of it. But it's a talented room. It is. But Sawchuk is the one that's been the most reliable, the most consistent, and he's shown the ability to hit some home runs, which I think is what this offense is going to need out of the running game, because I don't know, especially early on, if they're consistently going to be able to pick up 5, 6, 7 yards whenever they want to.
If we knew that Javonte Barnes is 100% healthy and he is going to be a part of that running back mix, and say it's him and Gavin, would that change things for you guys?
A little bit. I think that would be it would be more of a 1-2 punch. It would be kind of what you saw in the Cheez-It Bowl, over a year ago. But I don't know, man. I wouldn't be shocked if OU doesn't have a 1,000-yard rusher next year. Like I could see it being a situation where you have 3 guys rush for over 600 yards, something like that, or 700 yards, somewhere in that range. I just think come game 1 next year, what is it, August 31st is the first game, I think Gavin Sawchuk's going to be running back 1. Now, what is it come October, like Josh said? We'll see. And I still think even if Taylor Tatum or Javonte Barnes is starting, Gavin Sawchuk's going to have a role on this football team. I think that he's a good enough football player that if he stays healthy, he's going to get 10 to 15 carries a game probably.
And I certainly don't want to overlook what you just said, Josh, about Taylor Tatum, because I think that people see he's number 1 running back in the country. Maybe they do realize, maybe that just comes with having that number 1 tag next to you, just how talented this kid is. Some of the runs that you sent back when you went and saw him is just, it's different.
Well, and it's not one of these guys where you talk about, well, his body won't hold up. Like Taylor is 6'1", 210. He is a big physical guy. He's not, I'm not saying that it's not going to be a jump, but he's been playing Texas 6A. Like he knows what it looks like, what it's got to be. So he is, I think Longview's 5A, but the point still stands. He's been playing big school competition. And again, he's got the ability as a home run hitter. I think might be the best receiver in Oklahoma's backfield the second he walks on campus, because he's a guy Longview would just line up out in the slot and just let him go run verticals. Like he's that kind of guy. And I've said before, like there is some Joe Mixon to his game. I don't think he's quite as explosive as Joe was, and probably not quite as long. But with those exceptions, there's a lot of similarities to the strengths of their games and the way they play.
Just for reference, last year, Gavin Sawchuk ran for 744 yards. Tawi Walker was second, 513 yards. And then Dylan Gabriel was third. I think that's going to change next year. I mean, I don't think Jackson Arnold's going to be the third. Maybe he might be. I don't know. We'll see what Seth Luttrell's offense looks like.
Good note by Matt, too. Don't forget about Caleb Hicks. He sometimes is forgotten about the running back.
He had a great
at
fall
the running
camp.
back position. I thought he was going to be a guy, when you come out of August, I thought he was going to be a guy that certainly maybe got the carries that Dalen Smothers got in some of those games late.
Yeah. I don't know. And he looks great. I mean, I remember seeing him out there, I think it was for spring last year and then fall when we watched him in practice, and it was like, that guy looks like he can play.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I agree with you, Drew. I don't think anybody's, certainly giving up on him or forgetting about him and talking about Javonte Barnes. It just, the whole thing was so weird a year ago, and it's going to be, hopefully, at some point during the spring, we'll be able to talk to either DeMarco or Javonte and really kind of get a good idea of what all went into from August and that time that we talked to him over at the rugby fields to the time, certainly to now or to the current day, where it's just still a big old question mark about what happened to him. So it was good. And this was good. I think that this is something that we can continue to do right here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. Josh, I hope the McQuestians have a lovely time down in Orlando. I'll be praying for you.
There are 3 of the 4 that are going to have a blast.
Is this an all-inclusive type situation?
No, it's not all inclusive. Now you can.
I don't know. I don't know how
you can pay Disney and make it that way. Like you pay for your food and drinks in advance. But Tiffany has crunched all the numbers and looked at it. Like Tiffany really, I think Tiffany enjoys planning these things as much as the actual trip itself. So, and obviously the girls they're geeked up about. I think we have a princess dress for every day for each one of them. I mean, my life is madness. You guys. You have no idea. I will absolutely send pictures.
Are you sure you don't want Scoop HD to come document the entire trip?
Sure. You can come. I would be interested to see how long you would last.
Well,
Eddie.
I'm busy this week, and if you can move the trip,
this guy couldn't even handle the Riverwalk in San Antonio.
I could handle it. I just didn't like it. There's a difference.
Okay, Eddie.
There should be a behind the music of Eddie in San Antonio in 2023 at some point. That should just happen.
I love San Antonio.
I saw a
never forget the Alamo
TikTok. I saw a TikTok the other day of some guys at Disney World, and they tried to see how much it would cost to just go around and have like a day of drinking, and it was like after like 3 drinks, they were already over $100. So good luck with that, Josh.
Sounds like a loser.
It is. Yeah, and it's
Their drinks
hard
are
to
really
get
expensive.
a good hard booze on. That's the worst part. You can't even black yourself out to realize how much money you're spending. It's painful.
Easy with the words there. Ron DeSantis might not let you into the state of Florida. All right, that's a good spot to end. Josh, we appreciate it. Have a good trip. Have a safe trip. We'll be definitely thinking about you as you go through that. George, thank you for showing up to work today at 5:00. And for myself.
I did not show up to the office till 5, an hour before, and then I immediately left and went to Chipotle.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Norman Treasure.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for your time out there. We will be right back here. If you haven't watched it yet, Bob Prisbillo and I did a Hoops report today, and we also have a special interview with Family Business episode number. I guess this would technically be episode number 2.
Yep.
With Dede Westbrook, which was a very interesting conversation that I'm sure you're going to want to watch, and you can find that right here on SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. Thank you to Carrie Murdoch for producing today. We got you there. This is like a first. So, thank you. And thank you to everybody else out there. We will probably be doing more and more of these, as we said, as we move into the spring and then obviously into the summer. And before you know it, Oakland's going to be in the SEC